You can read. You can read, you can read, you can read, you can read. Yes, indeed, you can read, you can read. You can read, you can read, you'll succeed. You can read, you can read, you can read, you can read.
Oh, good morning. Did I disturb your nap?
Oh, hey there. Nice to see you guys again. Ready to...
Hey there yourself. So, what do you have on tap this time?
Ready to debunk some of these horrible myths that are going against the Almighty God of the Old Testament of the Bible? Maybe you're just...
Look, I came here expecting to critique your narrative, but for the love of St. Gulick, do I have to correct your introduction? From Wikipedia, myth, a story of the gods, a religious account of the beginning of the world, the creation, fundamental events, the exemplary deeds of the gods as a result of which the world, nature, and culture were created together with all parts thereof and given their order, which still obtains. A myth expresses and confirms society's religious values and norms. It provides a pattern of behavior to be imitated, testifies to the efficacy of ritual with its practical ends, and establishes the sanctity of cult. The positions I hold in regard to your subject matter du jour do not involve gods or religious accounts. They involve historical facts. It is possible that some or even all of my positions are in error, but that would make them misconceptions, not myths. Myth is your God's bailiwick.
Maybe you're just confused and you don't know exactly what these 613 Mosaic laws mean. Or maybe you're an atheist and you just don't really care and don't want to know, so you'll just take a verse here and there and say, oh, God is for rape, God is for rape.
Well, I am an atheist, and I do care, and I do want to know. You see, I am something of an amateur biblical scholar. I find it fascinating to try to get inside the heads of the people who invented that stuff. And while I concentrate on the New Testament, I realize that a degree of comprehension of the Old Testament is necessary to an understanding of the New Testament, since the New draws heavily from the Old. So don't tell me what I do or don't want to know.
God is for rape. Well, I keep hearing that atheists keep saying that God is for rape and that the God of the Old Testament promotes rape.
I often hear that myself, and while I have my own ideas on the subject, I will concentrate on what you have to say. After all, that is why I am here.
Rape. Today I'm here to debunk all of that. So, let's go to your Bibles in Deuteronomy chapter 22 and start at verse 22. If a man be found lying with a woman married to an husband, then they shall both of them die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman, so shalt thou put away evil from Israel. Now, you might be thinking, well, this punishment doesn't fit the crime. This is terrible. What kind of God would do this? This wasn't just in that world. There's punishments even to this day in certain countries in Asia that have punishments for adultery. That's what this is, adultery.
Not so fast. If the liaison is consensual, yes, this is adultery. But what of a man raping another man's wife? That case will be covered, right?
Now, take your mind, okay? Think like a historian. Take your mind 4,000 years ago and living in a society back then with the mentality and culture of those people. You're going to think very differently than you do right now. Now,
interesting. So you are saying that your God thinks in the manner of the Bronze Age sheep herders that wrote down its word? How then am I to distinguish between what your God told those sheep herders to write and what they came up with themselves? I have a pretty good idea, but I will save it for the end of this enterprise.
Now, if we have punishments for crimes, that inhibits the crime. That prevents the crime from happening. The greater the punishment, the less likely you're to see the crime. That's the idea, at least, right? Well, perfect example. A little bit of fines for speeding, 100, 150 bucks. Well, those crimes happen all the time. So the greater the punishment, the less likely we are to see the crime. That's what these are. Great punishments so that we don't see the crime. That's the whole purpose of these laws. That's what God...
So, your God says that the more severe the punishment, the less likely the crime. Unfortunately, the numbers don't bear that out. In an article dated 25 January 2017, procon.org assembled 20 opinions on the effectiveness of capital punishment in deterring crime. 10 pro, 10 con. One would think that if capital punishment were indeed an effective deterrent, the opinions would not be evenly split. As it turns out, however, that is not the case. The last pro opinion and the last con opinion were delivered from the same bench at the same time in the same case. On 29 June 1972, in the decision of Furman versus Georgia that struck down the death penalty throughout the United States, Justice Thurgood Marshall wrote for the majority. Despite the fact that abolitionists have not proved non-deterrence beyond a reasonable doubt, they have succeeded in showing by clear and convincing evidence that capital punishment is not necessary as a deterrent to crime in our society. For the minority, Justice Lewis Franklin Powell Jr. wrote, "Prima facie, the penalty of death is likely to have a stronger effect as a deterrent to normal human beings than any other form of punishment, and there is some evidence, though no convincing statistical evidence, that this is in fact so." Note that while Justice Marshall writes of clear and convincing evidence that capital punishment is not a deterrent to crime, Justice Powell admits that the deterrent effect of capital punishment is not statistically measurable. This can hardly be considered a pro opinion, so the balance must weigh against capital punishment. Your God loses the argument, but we have not yet seen the Old Testament disposition of the case of the rape of a married woman. I await that.
These laws. That's why God wants his society to be perfect, especially in a land where all these other nations were filled with paganism, filled with adultery, fornication, and weird sexual practices. God wanted to separate his people from all of those, even with dietary restrictions that we see in another chapter, which is for a later day, to try and have a holy, separate people that is clean and pure in his eyes. That's his own children. And that's what he even wants to this very day. These things defiled people on the inside, these sexual acts. So the punishment was to keep these things from happening, and it also prevented the defamation of the family name and the father who had the daughter or the son, to prevent all these things from happening, because it was a great sin against the family too. Nowadays, people sleep around left and right like it's nothing, but back then it was a huge deal. It was a big deal. It could probably affect the father's business if his daughter was deemed a whore.
A repressive society might well kill those who do not abide by every jot and tittle of its edicts, or at the very least try to legislate them out of existence if killing them is out of the question. Or in the case of adultery in ancient societies, it could be what it seems to be, revenge. But what of the married woman who is raped?
But here we also see that if the people were found, they were to be killed only in concordance with Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15, where it says that one witness is not enough to convict somebody. There must be at least 2 or 3 witnesses, and they have to be true witnesses, not a false witness. So, yes, the punishment doesn't seem to fit the crime. I know a lot of, say, atheists won't like it. But you know what's interesting? I hear a lot of atheists say that a man who rapes a woman should be killed. Oh yeah, I hear that from atheists all the time. Well, atheists, guess what? You're going to have God Almighty grant you your wish. You're going to find out in a few verses later. But first, let's go to verse 23. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto an husband, and a man find her in the city, and lie...
Atheists tell you all the time that a rapist should be killed. Then you are not talking to the greater part of the atheist community, who are among the most vocal opponents of capital punishment. But again, what of the married woman who is raped? Nothing. Zilch. Zip. Nada. Deuteronomy goes from a man lying with a married woman, which is taken as adultery in all cases, right to a man lying with a damsel. So any sex with a married woman involving a man other than her husband is considered adultery, even if it is in fact rape. Victim blaming much?
A few verses later. But first, let's go to verse 23. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto an husband, and a man find her in the city, and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both out into the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die, the damsel because she cried not, being in the city, and the man because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you. Now, a couple things here. First, a betrothed. It says she's betrothed, okay? The damsel's betrothed, which means she is in this kind of engagement yet marriage stage, okay? She's married now. Because back then in ancient Jewish culture, there were two wedding ceremonies. The first was called the betrothal, so that's what it means here. And then for about a year, a woman was married to the husband, but she was still living with her father until the second ceremony, which was the official wedding ceremony, which was the transfer of a girl from her father's possession to the groom's possession, and then she lived with him.
Interesting way you put that. From her father's possession to the groom's possession. A property transaction. This tells me a lot about what your God thinks of women. And it tells me what you think of women for that matter. Oh, and I noticed that you said, and she cried not in red. We will get to that shortly.
She lived with him. So this is saying if a woman who's married goes and sleeps with a man, they're both caught and there's witnesses, they're to be put to death and put evil away from among you. Okay, now it says something interesting here. It says, because she cried not. Now, I've heard atheists come with the excuse, oh, she just has to cry. Big deal. She just has to cry and then she gets out of it. What it's saying is that if a woman's raped, if a witness finds two people, it's pretty obvious to tell if it's consensual or if there's a rape going on. Because if there's a rape going on, the woman is going to be, it's just going to be obvious. So, that's what this is saying. The woman wasn't crying out loud. She wasn't being raped, which means she was consenting to it.
No, Sirah. The woman likely cried not because she feared for her life. This article from the South African Daily Sun, dated 21 April 2018, describes a rapist saying to his victims the words all too many women know. If you scream, I will kill you. But what care you? Your God and you view rape as a property matter, as we shall see.
She was consenting to it. But what if she did cry out loud? Let's continue reading. But if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her, that's a key term, force her, and that is in Hebrew because that term is not in these other verses, which indicates rape. We're also going to see that it indicates rape somewhere else. Continuing, and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. But unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death. For as when a man riseth against his neighbor, another key word, and slayeth him, even so is this matter. For he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to save her. Now, look at this here. A man rapes a woman. It says in verse 27, because she cried. that means she was being raped. So, only the man shall die. So, atheists, how many of you say a man that rapes a woman should die? I think you're going to like God all of a sudden, huh? Maybe not. Probably not. Yeah, we'll say probably not. It's probably not enough. But just know this. You have a lot more in common with this Old Testament God that you don't seem to like, even though you don't believe in him.
I take that as an insult. We atheists have little, if anything, in common with your God, what shows itself to be an evil bastard in these pages and others.
Now, the atheist is going to come with an argument that says, oh, well, this is just for the Hebrews, these laws. This isn't protecting foreign women. Well, wait a second. There's a key that's given in this verse here, verse 26. For when a man riseth against his neighbor, in Hebrew and Greek, neighbor, the Bible is written in, and I mentioned Greek because of the New Testament, because Jesus says, love thy neighbor as thyself, which hangs all the law and the Old Testament. In Matthew chapter 22, Jesus says that. So Jesus is saying, anybody next to you, not just somebody who's a Jew. And right here it's saying, you don't have the right to go and rape even a foreigner. You have to treat your neighbor as yourself, literally the person next to you. It doesn't say brother or sister, meaning another Hebrew. Now,
Your scripture would have it otherwise. I note that apologists and street preachers alike take the Old and New Testaments together when it suits them, and distinguish one from the other when they see that to their advantage. When we look at Luke 10, verses 25 to 37, also known as the parable of the Good Samaritan, we see that the author was distinguishing one from the other in regard to the concept of neighbor, from the New International Version. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this, and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." The author of Luke sets the Samaritan as the protagonist of this parable because halakhic Jews bitterly hated the Samaritans, and the Samaritans held like disdain toward the Jews. Neither considered the other reacha, which is translated neighbor, but which the Old Testament considers to be a fellow Jew. The purpose of the parable of the Good Samaritan was to redefine reacha to include everyone, and thus we see that your interpretation is a misappropriation.
Now you might then say, oh, but wait a second, this is only for betrothed damsels, which means she's married, which means if she's not married, then she's being then it's okay to rape them. Well, no. If it's not okay to rape a Jew, the language is implied. Then it's not okay to rape a non-Jew. Now, additionally, pagan women were naturally kind of loose.
Where the hell did that come from? So much for love your neighbor as yourself, eh?
But we're going to find out next what happens if they did consent, be it them, and we're going to see the language here, Jewish or non-Jewish. If a man find a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, not married, and lay hold on her, and lie with her, and they be found, then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he hath humbled her. He may not put her away all his days. Saying that he humbled her means that he simply took her virginity, because a girl who wasn't a virgin wasn't desired to be married. And if a man married a girl and found out she wasn't a virgin, he could just leave her and she couldn't get what's called the dowry. The dowry, I mentioned this in other videos, I'm not going to explain it again. Look up what a dowry was. So,
I already know what a dowry is, but I looked it up anyway to have a reference to offer. A dowry is wealth that a woman brings into a marriage to aid in setting up a new household. This is not at all what is referenced in Deuteronomy 22, verses 28 and 29.
What it's basically saying is here is two people who are not married, who practice in the act of fornication, and they both consent to it.
And what have you been smoking, boy? This is not at all what this refers to. Note the wording, and he lay hold on her. If I take hold of you, you are not exactly walking into my embrace. Deuteronomy 22, verses 28 and 29 actually refers to something called marriage by abduction. I'll let you finish your drivel here and then address the issue in its entirety.
Now they're forced to get married. The punishment for fornication was marriage. Now, why you say 50 shekels? The 50 shekels is so cheap, pretty much any guy can afford that. Now, when a woman back then in ancient civilizations all over the world, not just in Judea, a way to prevent a girl from being married off to a wrong guy was to have the groom and his family pay what's called the bride price. In the Jewish culture, it was called the mohar, M-O-H-A-R. Look it up. Here it's saying the mohar, the bride price, is only 50 shekels of silver. Well, that's nothing. Why? What's the purpose? The purpose of this is to prevent men from fornicating with the women. Because if a man fornicates with a woman and the price to buy and marry her was high, he could say, oh, well, I can't afford it, sorry. So he could get out of marrying her, which means he can go sleeping around as much as he wants. Here it's saying, no, if you get caught, you are stuck with her. And you only have to pay 50 shekels of silver. That's nothing, which means she isn't worth that much in our society anyways because she's a whore. So no guy could say no. So the whole purpose of this was to prevent them from fornicating. And notice in this verse it says nothing about Hebrew sister. It could be anybody. It could be a foreigner too. The price was the price. You had to marry her and you couldn't divorce for the rest of your life. Last verse.
Now, to straighten you out. The reference in Deuteronomy 22, verses 28 and 29, is to the bride price or bride wealth. This is money paid by the suitor to the family of the bride in order to contract a marriage. It does not exist to prevent fornication. It exists to ensure that the potential groom has the resources necessary to provide for the household, and it is in no way an insignificant sum. The Code of Hammurabi, circa 1800 BCE, sets the value of unskilled labor at approximately 10 shekels per year of work. 50 shekels would then represent about 5 years' work for the common laborer. As young men were not always able to provide this price, they would often engage in the aforementioned marriage by abduction, in which a young man would kidnap and rape a young woman in an attempt to get her family to reduce the bride price and agree to the marriage. This is what Deuteronomy 22, verses 28 and 29 attempts to address.
Last verse. A man shall not take his father's wife nor discover his father's skirt. Now you might be saying, well, that's disgusting. Why would a kid go and sleep with his mother or his father's wife? So, in the ancient Jewish culture, the way it's written, they didn't have these terms like we do today for mother-in-law. If you had a mother, it could stepmother. It would imply a stepmother would be a mother, or a stepfather a father. So this is talking in those instances of a boy and his stepmom. A boy can't sleep with his stepmom.
This deals with incest, not rape. For the love of St. Gulik, what is this even doing here?
So, atheists, this is interesting. It appears as though the God of the Bible is against rape, unlike so many false accusations I hear from atheists and people alike who don't really seem to understand him. So yeah, God hates rape, atheists. So anytime you say to yourself or say to other people that if any man rapes a woman, he should be killed, know this. You didn't come up with that first. The God of the Old Testament that you can't stand so much did.
First of all, as I have said, there is no way to distinguish the words of your God written by men from the words of men written in the name of their God. Occam's razor would then direct me to discard unnecessary assumptions and conclude that these are the words of men, of mere humans. Next, the attitudes of these men are at best ambivalent toward rape, dealing instead with property rights and family honor. Lastly, I reject the claim that these men said it first. Note these points from the Code of Hammurabi, which bear a striking resemblance to the verses you cite from Deuteronomy. 129. If a man's wife be surprised in flagrante delicto with another man, both shall be tied and thrown into the water, but the husband may pardon his wife, and the king his slaves. 130. If a man violate the wife, betrothed, or child wife of another man, who has never known a man and still lives in her father's house, and sleep with her and be surprised, this man shall be put to death, but the wife is blameless. From Wikipedia. The Code of Hammurabi is a well-preserved Babylonian code of law of ancient Mesopotamia dated back to about 1754 BCE, Middle Chronology. Also from Wikipedia on the book of Deuteronomy, traditionally seen as the words of Moses delivered before the conquest of Canaan. A broad consensus of modern scholars see its origin in traditions from Israel, the northern kingdom, brought south to the kingdom of Judah in the wake of the Assyrian conquest of Aram, 8th century BCE, and then adapted to a program of nationalistic reform in the time of Josiah, late 7th century BCE, with the final form of the modern book emerging in the milieu of the return from the Babylonian captivity during the late 6th century BCE. Oops. It seems that Deuteronomy was influenced on these and other points by a document written 1,200 years earlier. Sorry, Joe, you lose on all counts. If you folks have actually put up with me through to the end of this video, I'll tell you that the next in this series is a presentation by Theomachy, a response to Slavery in the Bible, Exodus 21, verses 1 through 6. A link is in the description as well as on screen. And as always, I am Diana Clarion, and I thank you for watching. First of all, as I have said, there is no way to distinguish the words of your God written by men from the words of men written in the name of their God. Occam's razor would then direct me to discard unnecessary